You're listening to the Values and Leadership Podcast, where business leaders share their stories of purposeful impact and success.
Welcome to the Values and Leadership Podcast, the podcast for innovative leaders who want to apply new ways of doing things in work to become more successful and have a purposeful impact on their stakeholders. I am your host, Ahmed Arif. We invite corporate leaders, advisors, and owners who believe in participative leadership and love to share their positive life and business experiences, their sense of direction, sense of meaning, and how they challenge their thinking in growing their business and the people around them to their next best stage. In this episode, we are discussing workplace innovations, cross-cultural psychology, and the future of work with Oliver Baxter, the Insight Program Manager at top design firm Herman Miller. With over 20 years of combined industry experience, teaching, and academic practice, Oliver helps create great places to reach their potential. As a speaker, psychologist, and self-proclaimed brand evangelist, Oliver has recently returned from a trip to the Asia-Pacific region where he gained incredible insights on the challenges of collaboration in a modern world. Welcome to the show, Oliver.
Ahmed, thank you very much for having me, sir. It's a great pleasure to be on your show today.
Great, thank you. In our podcast, we are focusing on corporate culture, and today we are honored to have you as a special professional who embraces a unique outlook towards the corporate culture in the sense of two radical concepts. The first concept is that corporate culture, by definition, refers to intangible aspects of business, whether we talk about values, corporate branding, corporate identity. And the new emerging insight that you are bringing today is that how visible these intangible corporate aspects expressed through its workplace design can have a very real impact on a business. Secondly, Herman Miller has a historical unique approach that prioritizes and embeds universal human needs in everything you do, internally and to your customers. These two concepts will be discussed within the current COVID environment, which is opening up future of work embedded in humanism. So we'd like first to start by discussing the current events and the evolving nature of work in 2020 and onwards. With the effects of COVID-19, changing the way people work globally and shifting the emphasis to working from home, does Herman Miller consider this a challenge to its business model? Or have you discovered that this situation has presented areas for potential growth? Because you are an office furniture manufacturer. So how do you see this?
Yeah, I mean, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? So I think we've honestly, taken stock and looked inside ourselves, and we are constantly doing scenario planning research, so futurology, to see what might come down the line. And we've been doing that for around 20 years now. And at no point have we seen a vision in our futurology or scenario planning research that wouldn't involve people going to a physical workplace to do work. And then, there was even one piece that back in 2001 that specifically addressed elements of like what would happen if a global pandemic occurred. And then, of course, now it's happened in 2020. So it's kind of thrown everything up into the air. But what Miller's main drive and motivational factor is focusing on the human experience. So focusing on people. Our founder, DJ Dupree, healthcare, be that residential or commercial offices, is not the furniture, it's the people, right? So we're the most important element to any room. But of course, we've discovered that during COVID that no one can go into offices anymore. So all the furniture, the real estate is being a little bit redundant. So we're not going to be in this situation forever. But what it has highlighted is that we were consuming too much space in real estate, which we kind of knew when we were championing with our clients anyway. There's a lot of redundant real estate out there. So, organizations that are giving every employee a desk and a chair, as an example, tremendous waste of furniture and real estate there, because we spend on average 30% of our day sat at a desk and a chair. Not to mention meeting rooms, which are too big and underutilized, which are all kind of standardized as well. And then private offices, from our research, if you've got your own private dedicated office, it's unoccupied 76% of the time. So lots of wasted real estate going on there. So we can look to reducing the footprint of offices, as we come out of the COVID environment. But then also, as highlighted by some great research from a company called the Leaseman Index, is that we're having a better experience of work from home than we are in most offices today. Yeah. There's multiple issues, but one of the main issues is what your environment looks like working from home. So if you're working from a dining room table, and you've got your wife and your kids in your environment, you are not going to have as positive, productive experience than someone who has their own dedicated office space. So there is like this continuum of like performance, and if you're on a coffee table or a dining room table, in comparison to being in your own private office, private offices are significantly more productive and you perform better. So there's also what's really interesting for us, and it's kind of confirmed our belief, is that the quality of the desk and a chair in the home experience is significantly lower than it is in the commercial environment. And that is one of the most closely associated with productivity elements for an employee is their desk and a chair. So we need to dramatically, just making up words there, dramatically improve the quality of the desk and a chair, and also have it as a separate, isolated area if we want to augment performance to its maximum whilst working from home.
So maybe now, while you are talking, you opened one idea in my mind for you, for your marketing team, that you may think of producing desk and chair for home for the employees who are moving to work from home now. And I heard, by the way, that there are companies that they are planning now to give employee reimbursement for one time in lifetime to prepare a place in their homes to have a desk and chair. So maybe this is something.
Yeah. It's funny you should say that. And for anyone listening, we haven't had this conversation already, but because we're the leaders in ergonomics, we invented ergonomics in the corporate world back in the 40s, I believe it was. We have a plethora of products that's appropriate for at-home working, be it desks, chairs, monitor arms to get your laptop screen or your monitor screen to the correct height. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Organizations like Google are giving their employees $1,000 per person to invest in ergonomic solutions for working from home. And this is something that we're also rolling out internally at Herman Miller, is that we've very kindly by the organization given $750 per employee to invest in the home working solutions. So that's not just our products. Lots of people have been buying like earpods and headsets and high quality cameras and great audio equipment because they do lots of webinars, as I do. And others have been taking advantage of the deep discounts that we also get from working for a wonderful company like Herman Miller, who has some fantastic desks and chairs and monitor arms and whatnot. So I feel very privileged to work for an organization that's so forward thinking and is able to meet the demands out there for people working from home.
Thank you for sharing this information with us, Oliver. Now let's discuss your recent business trip and the incredible insights that you gained while traveling. Could you elaborate more on the connections between stakeholders in a working environment? For instance, the material spaces required for fruitful collaboration in the Middle East are radically different from those in Australia. Can you share some information on this topic that you have learned?
Yeah, so between the period of like 2017, 2019, my role changed quite dramatically. At the moment, I'm currently based in the Middle East, and I cover the Middle East and Africa region now. But during that 2-year period, I was also given the APAC region to cover as well. So I was covering Middle East, Africa, and APAC. So like the vast majority of the world, really. And it was really interesting to go around and just see all these massively contrasting cultures and experiences and look at some of the, the world's best workplaces as well. So I had a wonderful opportunity to spend a great deal of time in India, in Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, New Zealand. Sorry, it sounds like I'm showing off right now, but I just want to demonstrate the diverse experience that I had while I was over there. And even like in India, you drive from one area of India to another and it's completely contrasting. It's got its own currency and its own, nuanced dialect and language there as well. So it was really interesting. And there was one thing that united every region that I went to, and it was the question that was always asked at the end, or maybe a statement or a comment that was always asked at the end of the presentations and workshops that I did. And it was, Oliver, really enjoyed the content there, but please understand that here it's different. Here it's unique. My response was all, I get that. I understand that your culture is incredibly unique, but the spaces that you consume are no different to anywhere else in the world that I visited. So if I'm in London or if I'm in Singapore or Hong Kong or Australia or India, I can guarantee you 99% of the time that I'm in a long rectangular conference room that caters for 25 people. So that's a collaborative space. Yet every client, every region of the world is telling me how unique and different they are, but their selection when it comes to space and furniture is pretty standardized. And the idea is that that's probably one of the worst shapes that you could do for collaboration, but it's the first shape that we got, right? So when we first created offices like over 100 years ago now, like 150 years, the first boardrooms were long and rectangular. So the boss could sit at the head and bark orders to everybody else. It was an authoritarian dictatorship, and the shape was designed as such. So everybody could just take their orders and then go off and implement them. And now we're asking people to collaborate and be more creative and innovative, but we're still giving them the same space that was designed for authoritarian dictatorships, i.e. that long rectangular meeting room table. So is it any wonder that people don't feel comfortable in these spaces? And again, the irony also isn't lost on me that when I ask people, we anecdotally know this unconsciously, how many people are in the average collaborative group? So when you're collaborating with someone, how many people are in that group? Well, on average, people say 3 to 5 people. But every meeting room is like 12 to 25. In fact, the average that we've observed recently is 10 seats. There's 10 seats in the average meeting room. So that means it's 2 times too big. We need to have smaller, more precision fit meeting spaces to cater for collaboration today. And we need to look at an array of different shapes as well for the meeting room table. Because you, as I have, probably have sat in a meeting room and you can't see past the other person's head. So you end up jockeying for head position so you can see past someone's head to see the speaker or the technology. Like long rectangular is probably the worst shape you can do. So I see more similarities than I see differences, but I understand everybody is unique, and I understand that the same organization, so I remember working with Deloitte in Scotland a number of years ago, and we were working on Glasgow and Edinburgh, and you'd imagine those facilities would be incredibly similar, but no, their people did, quite different work. So the way that those spaces were designed was to meet the types of work that the people did. So the space that they got in Glasgow and Edinburgh were very different, even though they were in Scotland. Although if I was to say that to someone who's Scottish, they're like, "Oh no, Glasgow and Edinburgh are very different," and they are. But but it was more about the work that their people did that drove the difference in setting. Well, I've got one thing to add actually. There is one nuance for collaboration that I have observed, and that was when I came to the Middle East 5 years ago. When I first started traveling to Saudi Arabia, I thought they were going to be quite closed off to a lot of the things I was saying. I couldn't have been more wrong. They were actually very open, and was one of the first regions that I actually started working with for our living office design process that we have at Herman Miller. But I was delivering some research that we call the psychology of collaboration, which talks about introverts and extroverts and how they like to consume space differently. And at the end, the gentleman said, Habibi, this was very interesting, but please know here is different. And I'm like, okay, here we go again. And then he explained to me that actually, in the Arabic culture, we spend a lot of time collaborating just before and just after prayer. And I'm like, oh, that is very different actually. So when they come back to their workstations, it is heads down and back into focused work. So what I discovered actually is that when it comes to collaborative spaces, we're probably better off positioning them in close proximity or adjacent to prayer rooms rather than around workstations. because we need to cater for where the activity is happening, not necessarily where we want it to occur, right? So I still think we need collaborative areas near workstations as well. But I think in the Arabic culture, especially around prayer spaces, we need to focus on providing those collaborative areas near the prayer settings.
This is very interesting because I know some big companies here in the Middle East, they don't have a places for prayer. So I think they are missing on some collaboration opportunities between the employees.
Yeah, could be. Could be.
Really?
Interesting to research into that.
Yeah. Yes. Related to that is the Deloitte study that you mentioned about that anticipates that white collar work in the near future will comprise from 20 to 40% of contractual workers. And at that point, trust building areas like cafeterias will become increasingly valuable. Yet the current mindset of the management does not acknowledge the value of these areas. Sometimes even some companies, they had this area of the cafeteria and then suddenly they close it because they think that people are wasting time there. So do you see this changing in the near future?
Well, the Deloitte study is an interesting one because they hypothesized, they were doing futurology research themselves. They thought that it would become around 40% of the white collar workforce would be contractual by 2020. And that wasn't including a COVID situation included in that. And before COVID, actually, we weren't really seeing that in the data. So we weren't seeing like a big influx of white collar contractual workers. I'd be interested to see it now. We're in COVID and lots of people have left or lost their jobs and they're kind of starting things on their own. So they could be the new contractual workers that Deloitte was hypothesizing about. But yeah, I think essentially what we're discussing is if we have a rise of contractual or even new employees post-COVID, we need spaces to build community in offices. We need spaces to build belonging and trust. And the best space to do that is in the cafeteria, the pantry, or what we would call the plaza space in an office. And I don't say that lightly. We've done some research at Herman Miller. And that research, we took blood samples from employees to discover two molecules in the blood. One, which was oxytocin. If you've had a child or been to an antenatal class, you'll know that oxytocin can induce labor. And it's also closely associated with those first early bonds between mother and child and father and child. And, you know, everybody kind of gets an elevated level of oxytocin when they're doctors, nurses, surgeons, when a child is being born. And then the other molecule we're looking at was adrenocorticotropic, which is a quick release stress hormone. So we could tell by taking blood samples where the most trusting spaces and where the most stress-inducing or reducing spaces in an office. And we actually discovered that the pantry, the plaza, the cafeteria was the best at reducing stress, and it was the second best at significantly increasing trust. So that's really what you want, right? You want to encourage less stressful work and encourage greater community in workplaces today. But yeah, I mean, the irony is not lost on me is that the pantry, the bars, and the cafeteria is one of the first spaces that a company will eat into when they've got to fit 20% more people, because it's seen as a nice to have, right? It's not an essential element from senior leadership, which is why I'm so glad that I work for an organization, Herman Miller, that has gone to the lengths of conducting this research to say categorically no. You know, I can understand why you think that, you know, is a non-essential element, but from our blood work research, we've discovered that it is by far one of the most vital areas in the workplace today. If you care about reducing stress, productivity and performance, and creating a community where people want to stay and work collaboratively together.
This is actually challenging as the current mindset view, which is saying that this is a waste of time. But now you are providing a different mindset. How fascinating this.
Yeah, of course. And we're seeing it out there in the market. Like everyone's descending on coffee shops today, right? You know, they're all going to coffee shops and co-working spaces because they've got good amenities. And, you know, there's some fresh produce there. So, you know, we're seeing people unconsciously gravitate to these areas because their needs are being served.
Yeah, socializing is part of the human nature. I appreciate your sharing your insights. Let's shift to a related topic, the incorporation of office design into business. You mentioned in an interview that 90% of an average balance sheet is spent on people, while with the remaining 10% allocated to space or amenities overheads. Could you please elaborate on this? How does this impact the productivity or success of the business?
Yeah, so that statistic that I referenced was from the World Green Building Council. So they assess real estate and employee spend all over the world. So the average is you spend about 10% on your real estate. Of your outgoings, you spend 10% on real estate, and the other 90% is spent on people. So you can see that people are by far the largest assets to an organization. So a person, if you use that kind of 9-to-1 model, a person, i.e. me or yourself, we cost 9 times more than the real estate that we consume. So what's happening with the real estate equation when we're in offices? Well, typically there's kind of 2 metrics for space. How many people can we cram into the smallest space possible? And that's literally what they're trying to do right now. So can we make your existing space smaller with the same amount of people, right? Or can we cram even more people into the same amount of space? So those are the 2 metrics that the space is looking at today. And of course, if you understand that people are significantly more expensive than the space they consume, we understand that that's probably the wrong way to look at it. We need to focus on people first and then look at the space thereafter. So if we look at people first, well, how are they feeling about work? Well, they're not feeling that great. So if we look at Gallup's data on engagement, this is 2017 data, so it's a little bit dated, but it's the most current up-to-date engagement data that we have from Gallup. They highlighted that only 15%, 15% of people are actually engaged with work. The other 85% are not engaged with the jobs that they're doing. It's the lowest level of engagement that we've had in the last 50 years. So this space reductive model is having a negative consequence on people's engagement and therefore their performance and productivity as well. So what's been interesting is analyzing the work from home data and comparing it to the work from office data. And actually the work from home is better than the work from office data. So that's kind of alarming because we're not focusing on people, we're focusing on cost reduction strategies, which is having a negative effect on people.
This is very interesting, yes. Sometimes when you prioritize cost only, you lose things which is related to the core of your business, which is the employee's performance. Great.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. Let's move on to focus on the Herman Miller unique approach for universal human needs. And how do you apply this into your work culture? And how do you apply that in your business? So Herman Miller prioritized the human needs to satisfy its user needs. How does this affect the furniture design? How does this affect the furniture deliveries through Herman Miller supply chain? Can you give us a view about that?
Yeah, of course. We understand the human element for many years. As I said before, the most important element of any environment is the people that are dwelling within it. So we want to understand what motivates people. So we've been looking through the last 80 years worth of research, and we've identified kind of 6 what we would call fundamental human needs. They are status, achievement, belonging, purpose, security, and autonomy. Those are the 6. So if you look at the literature, it's not uncommon to hear those words arise. So we can date this back to content from the hierarchy of needs, basically. So it's not exactly new content. But what we're trying to look at it is how can space affect those motivational factors? So we've been working with 12 clients over the last number of years to measure these 6 fundamental human needs in their old legacy environments and then in their new, what we would call living office environments. And living office is our process for designing space and influencing space based on the people's needs. And what we discovered is that interior design or the living office does have an effect on human motivation. But it doesn't dramatically affect all 6 of those needs. It only really affects 2 of them in a dramatic way.
So thanks for sharing, Oliver. Before we finish up, I have just a couple of questions about Herman Miller. How Herman Miller brings culture and human needs to life. So Herman Miller is prioritizing the human needs to satisfy its user needs. How does this affect the furniture design and furniture deliverables through Herman Miller supply chain? Can you give us your insights on that?
Yeah, of course. So we're a little bit different when it comes to furniture manufacturers. We believe putting people at the heart of everything that we do. So if people are at the heart of our business, we need to figure out kind of what motivates them, because we're in the business of performance, right? We've got to help people perform their best whilst at work. So we sifted through 80 years worth of literature and research on human motivation, discussing things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that kind of triangle to get from the bottom to self-actualization at the top. And we kind of redefined the fundamental human needs as 6 different categories. So you've got status, achievement, purpose, belonging, autonomy, and security. So those 6 is what we've identified from kind of sifting through the last part of data set from 12 clients from around the world, from taking them from their old legacy environments to their new living office spaces. So living office is our design process internally that we use. And we measured these questions. So we asked them questions relating to achievement and purpose and belonging and security and status. And we assessed them in their old environments, and then we assessed them again in their new spaces. And what we discovered is that interior design, the effect that Herman Miller can have and others like us, and this living office process that we champion, does have an effect on human motivation, but it doesn't have a dramatic effect across all 6 indices. So actually the 2 biggest effects are in security and autonomy. Autonomy being like freedom, if you listen to William Wallace, right? So the freedom that we can experience at work and the security that we get whilst we're at work as well. So I think for autonomy, it was around about 20% increase from pre to post on average across the 12 clients. And for security, it was around 33%, I believe. And with the others, so if we think about belonging and purpose and achievement, there was like a 2 to 6% increase. So not as dramatic as the other 2. So it does have an effect, but we know that the biggest effect that interior design, Herman Miller, and our living office process can have is on security and autonomy. So I like to remind like the architecture and design community and the clients that we're working with that during your new refurbishment, your relocation, your new office design, you literally have like the feelings of your people's freedom and their security in your hands. If you don't do this project properly, if you don't give it the time that is required, then you can have a negative effect on people's security and their autonomy.
Your design team and your supply chain team, who was responsible for the delivery of the furniture to the clients, how do they use the human needs into designing their work, into the process itself that they follow every day? How do they do that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the 6 fundamental human needs are affected in different ways by interior design. I think security being the one that is closely associated with products themselves. So we divide security into its traditional sense, also security being physical comfort and whether people are supported whilst they're at work. So that's why we, for a number of years have developed and championed ergonomics whilst people are at work. So much so that we have the most ergonomic task chair, the most ergonomic office chair in the world, which is the Embody, which we've just recently released as a gaming chair as well. So we've added even more ergonomic elements to this chair. So that's how we focus on kind of the one that we understand that we have control over, which is security and physical comfort, and envelop that into our products and into our processes that we supply to clients. We're chunking that out from what we deliver in terms of the products themselves through some of the design work that we do. We can start to add in more of those fundamental human needs. We can start to focus on autonomy. So autonomy again is freedom, and freedom is really about giving people choice. So we like to take the time to figure out, what do people do? What are the spaces that they require to do that work within? and then provide them spaces to do that work within. And then hopefully the employee can then feel empowered thereafter to choose an environment to work in, depending on how they're feeling, what they want to think, and the activity that they're trying to do. You can also look at belonging in terms of creating those pantry, plazas, cafeteria spaces so people can come together. But it's not just those spaces. It can also be quick, collaborative, impromptu collaborative areas as well, something that's semi-formal, not formal in essence, but kind of less bookable environments. And that can help with belonging. So there are ways that we can, through the conceptual side of the design work, influence all six, but we understand that the biggest effect that we can have is in autonomy and security really relates to that physical comfort and the support in terms of ergonomics that we provide with all our furniture.
Nice explanation when you correlated the autonomy to the freedom and the choices, the span of choices that the employees can have now. Because in the current situation, you can find only like blocks where employees sit in blocks and they are separated from each other with whatever things from the right and the left, and they cannot see each other well and all of these things. So when you are designing things differently and giving choices to employees, this gives them a lot of, as you said, autonomy and freedom in designing how can they work and what's the space that they need even to do their work. So this is very nice explanation from you. My next question: how does Herman Miller internally design its corporate culture, starting with its values and needs? And is there specific behaviors that you enforce, or the employees co-create, or it's just top down?
Yeah, it's a really interesting time to ask that question for us. Brian Walker, who was our previous CEO, he retired a couple of years ago now. And in that search, we have landed upon a fantastic new CEO called Andy Owen. She's ex-Gap, ex-Banana Republic. She has a really great mindset when it comes to the technology required to sell our products and furniture, which I think is something that we're probably lacking a little bit to a degree before as well, because we have been a little bit difficult to do business in the past, and we're trying to help become more of a lifestyle brand in the same way that Nike is a household brand, and definitely in the US, Herman Miller is a lifestyle brand. It's people have heard about us, and but in the rest of the world, it's not so much seen in the same light. So we're trying to become more of a lifestyle brand the world over. So Andy's come in and she's done a lot of changes. So we're still trying to kind of waiting for the dust to settle to a degree. We have a new mission statement that actually is coming out next week. I just got an email about it today. And she's already, and value propositions. So that's coming out next week. But we've also been looking at broader concepts such as like One Herman Miller. So how we can help leverage all the brands that we have within Herman Miller to create great places for people to do their best work within. So it's a good time to talk about corporate culture. And Andy's brought in, new people in the C-suite. We've had a new head of HR. They've done away with performance reviews, which for me was just like a godsend. I was so pleased to see the back of performance reviews, because as a psychologist, I know that they're actually counterproductive for the most part. People dread them. There's very little performance that comes off the back of them. And for many organizations, they tie them to salary as well. So it's a very negative consequence for performance reviews. We're now doing something called get-togethers, which is about focusing on, what is it we want to develop in ourselves, decided and discovered by ourselves. And then we come up with a solution as well, and the company helps us get there. So we're doing get-togethers now rather than performance reviews. And another element that I think is really dramatically affecting our culture, with all the shifts that's going on, it would be easy for us to kind of hope for the best, bury our head in the sand. But actually, since Andy came in, we've started to do the Gallup engagement surveys, so we can discover where are the weak areas in our business. What are people feeling that not being very well supported by from Herman Miller? So, Andy could have waited until she made all her decisions to put that survey out, but actually she wanted to, in my mind, from what I've seen, is use some of the data from Gallup to inform the decisions that she's making as well. So it's not just top down, it's also bottom up as well. And we're getting all the information from the data sets of Gallup. And we can benchmark that with our competitors in the industry and as organizations out there as well, and where we kind of fit in terms of the best performing organizations in the world. So yeah, those are a couple of good things that we've been doing recently to kind of figure out our own culture during this, high time of flux and change, not just during COVID, but during, a big C-suite change that we've experienced for the last 18 months. All good stuff.
Yeah, great. Great when you mentioned that there should be an impact for all of these changes on the reward system, because this is very motivating as well. You focus on the design and the space, but as well the reward system is very important, and the change of the name from performance review to get together. This gives you more belonging. It serves to the belonging need of the employees as well, not only as a formal process, which is called performance review. So when you have a get together, it gives you different dimension. So I like the new environment that you are experiencing now in Herman Miller.
Just saying performance review, how does that make you feel internally, right? Like you're probably like, oh no. I know that's how I used to feel. And now like get together, just the terminology itself is so much more soft and welcoming from my point of view. And I've had my first get together with my boss, and it was a pleasurable experience, more so than I thought it would be.
Was he the same boss or a new boss? Newly recruited?
Same boss, yeah.
But now different culture, so different mentality, different perception.
The culture is slowly shifting. I mean, it's difficult because we're such a global organization. So we have like a central culture, and then we try and feed it out to all the regions and the satellite offices. And I work in a relatively small office in Dubai where there's about 15 of us. Yes. So we have our own culture that is kind of a subset of the broader Herman Miller culture. But I'm also well connected to the States and the UK and Asia. So I am aware of the culture globally, and I'm aware of the culture when I go to Singapore or Hong Kong or London, and just how different it is. But it's kind of like your personality. It's the same everywhere, but there's a state element, there's a situational element to it. So that would be the employees at that given moment in time.
So how frequent now the get-together will be? Quarterly or?
Quarterly.
Before it was yearly?
It was yearly, yeah.
So now it's better. Quarterly.
Yeah, I think so. Not just because of the frequency, but because of the way that it's delivered. It's just focusing on what you have decided that you want to do. So for me, I wanted to build upon my ability to deliver feedback, both positive and constructive. So I've done some research, found some books, and I'm going to study up, and I have studied up on being able to better deliver feedback to my colleagues and to the community at large. So I'll benefit from that. It was something I was interested in, so therefore I'm motivated to follow up on it.
Especially when the feedback changes to feed forward. So if you are able to give feedback that's actionable, that's going to change the behavior or going to change the results in the future. So this is called feed forward. So I hope you embrace as well this same principle of feed forward, because feedback always it's about the past, but feed forward is about what are we going to do differently to achieve different results. So feed forward is a little bit more constructive, as you said, kind of constructive feedback for the future.
I love that. I'm taking it. I'm going to add it to my
I can send you
together
about that if you want to learn.
I love that. Thank you.
So currently, within all of these changes that's happening, the concept of 360 feedback survey, is it employed in Herman Miller?
Yes. So again, I'm in a relatively small office. So I think in the last 5 years, I've done 2 of them for management. But I think if I was in London or in Hong Kong, where we're talking or the States where you've got hundreds or thousands of people, then I would have completed many more 360s. But yeah, 360s has been something that we've used internally to help, figure out our weaknesses and strengths and build upon those.
Yep. And do you see a response from the management after the 360 happens, or it takes time?
Yeah, no, I have. I've seen, my previous, not direct report, but there was a dotted line locally because they were the regional managing director. And once he'd completed his 360, he then went on a course to work on elements that were highlighted in his 360 for managerial skills. And you could look at that as like a negative consequence, but I think, once you've highlighted something, as humans, we naturally try to improve it. So I can only see this as a good thing. And I believe he saw it the same way as well.
This is always the characteristic of successful leaders. They take this as an opportunity for progressing more and being more successful. And this is how the successful leader should be acting. Thank you so much for taking your time, Oliver, to chat with me today. It was incredibly interesting to hear about your unique experience and insight. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ahmed. Really appreciate being involved.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Dear listeners, in the next episode of the Values and Leadership podcast, we will share the secrets of success from another successful leader in business. Tune in to learn more about participative leadership and purposeful impacts in business.